Hello again, YouTube family. Thanks for joining me on this episode of my channel. And hopefully this is not going to run too long. I started taking notes on this video and I ended up with 14 pages of them. I'm trying to work through it. Please, if you like my videos, please give me a like. Please hit the subscribe button if you're not subscribed. And let's dive in. Tennessee, the state that I grew up in my formative years. Went to middle school, went to high school, went to college in Tennessee. And they are becoming not just vaccine hesitant, but just straight out anti-vax, which is nuts. And in the story, Tennessee is declaring war on vaccine outreach, and not just COVID vaccines are being targeted. The state's public health agency is doing away with vaccine outreach to children. Officials in the state can no longer remind kids or their parents to get their second COVID shot or their first. There are no COVID vaccine events allowed on school property in Tennessee, and the Tennessee Department of Health employees can no longer distribute vaccine-related materials. This is coming from the Tennessean. The agency can't distribute materials with the agency's logo on them. Just 38% of Tennesseans are fully vaccinated. The state has seen cases more than double in the past few weeks, along with other low-vax states. The COVID vaccine has emergency authorization from the FDA as opposed to full authorization. This is one of the more recent talking points. You hear from people on the right that, well, it's not FDA authorized. It's got an emergency authorization. It's not fully authorized. I don't want to get vaccinated until it's fully authorized by the FDA, which at the point when it's fully authorized by the FDA, they're going to come up with some other excuse to follow their right-wing ridiculous ideology. As I said, this has been an arguing point by the recently anti-vax right-wing, despite the fact that the FDA has assured the population that the vaccine is safe. Tennessee, however, is also targeting vaccines that have had full FDA authorization for years, including vaccines against measles, mumps, meningitis, and I'm going to try this word, human papillomavirus, HPV. That's the virus which causes cervical cancer. The vaccine against HPV, the human papillomavirus, which causes cervical cancer, is being targeted by the Republicans in the state of Tennessee. State medical staff were instructed to make no proactive outreach regarding routine vaccines. Period. No outreach regarding routine vaccines. And make no outreach whatsoever regarding the HPV vaccine. Again, the HPV vaccine protects against cervical cancer. The American Cancer Society estimates that this year there will be more than 14,000 new cases of cervical cancer diagnosed in the United States, resulting in around an estimated 4,300 deaths of women in this country. And so, when you have someone on the left say the right wing hates women, This is the kind of thing they're pointing to. It's not because of nothing, it's because of something. The shift away from vaccine outreach is politically driven. Tennessee state lawmakers just last month threatened to abolish the state health department entirely. The State Department of Health top immunization official distributed a memo to health providers stating that children age 14 to 17 have the legal right to seek medical care without parental consent. And this drove, this right includes vaccines, and this drove the right-wing lawmakers, it made the crazy in their heads start talking. Tennessee Republican State Senator Kerry Roberts commented, this is from State Senator Kerry Roberts from Tennessee. It looks like there is a mission here. Yes, trying to keep people safe. An agenda here to have children vaccinated with or without parental consent. Well, yeah. I would rather have a kid vaccinated without parental consent and be safe than have more kids end up in ICUs. Than have more kids show up hooked up to life support. The state health department official was fired. That's Dr. Michelle Fiscus, after she got glowing reviews prior to being fired. The state's chief medical officer, Dr. Tim Jones, sent out a letter recommending Fiscus's firing. Jones's letter states Fiscus should be fired because of a failure to maintain good working relationships with members of her team, her lack of effective leadership, her lack of appropriate management, and unwillingness to consult with superiors and other internal stakeholders. It's funny, he refers to politicians and state employees as stakeholders, like it's a corporation. Evaluation statements about Dr. Fiscus from the 2019 to 2020 review period stated, she had been attentive to her team. She exceeded expectations in managing. She performed an overall outstanding job. Her boss wrote in her review, Dr. Fiscus is a trusted and reputable advocate to promote vaccination in Tennessee. Dr. Fiscus has been a strong leader for the VPD team and has been an integral piece of the COVID pandemic response. Her leadership and efforts in multiple areas have been critical. Dr. Tim Jones, the one who wrote the letter recommending her be fired, signed off on these glowing reviews. They passed through his desk, and he signed off on them and said, yes, she is an outstanding member of our force. Dr. Fiscus believes she was, on that other point, Dr. Fiscus's reviews happened on February 18th, 2020, July 7th, 2020, and October 12th, 2020. All three times, Dr. Jones, the one who wrote saying she should be fired, signed off on all three of those reviews, glowing reviews, and then contradicting himself this year when the state Republican officials were pissed off. Dr. Fiscus believes she was a political victim. Republican state lawmakers had been trying to halt the vaccine outreach. Dr. Fiscus had been with the vaccination unit since 2016. All of her performance reviews have been released by her, and they were all just as positive. Tennessee has the mature minor doctrine. That is a law allowing minors age 14 to 17 to seek medical help, including vaccination, without parental consent. Vaccine providers had sent questions regarding vaccines to minors to Dr. Fiscus. Her memo that she sent out, that these Republican state lawmakers are claiming what was her insidious left-wingishness, wokeness, whatever buzzword they want to attach to it, that she was just sending out this memo saying you can vaccinate minors 14 to 17 without parental consent. Her memo was in response to the questions she was receiving from providers in the state, health providers in the state, because they had questions regarding vaccines, and she was the top official for vaccines. She responded to those questions by saying Tennessee state law allows that minors between the ages of 14 and 17 can make their own mind up to get vaccinated. You don't need parental consent. It's in the law. It's in the law. That's a law Tennessee has on the books. Republican state lawmakers claim Fiscus's letter was unduly encouraging adolescents to get vaccinations without parental consent, which is just them lying. The Republican state lawmakers are lying. Her letter was in no way encouraging adolescents to get vaccines without parental consent. She was responding to care providers who asked questions. That's where her memo went out to. Professionals at the American Academy of Pediatrics spoke out in support of Dr. Fiscus. Pediatrician and public health officials are medical experts who are trusted by the communities they serve. Dr. Fiscus's termination is the most recent example of a concerning trend of politicizing public health expertise. Actions like this only increase the likelihood that we will see other outbreaks of these diseases even as we continue to fight COVID-19. That was written by Dr. Lee Savio Beers from the American Academy of Pediatrics in defense of Dr. Fiscus, because she's not just some random doctor. She's rather well known in the field because of her position in the Tennessee state government. Dr. Fiscus's statement on being fired: "I am ashamed of them. I am afraid for my state. I am angry for the amazing people of the Tennessee Department of Health who have been mistreated by an uneducated public and leaders who have only their own interests in mind. And I am deeply saddened for the people of Tennessee who will continue to become sick and die from this vaccine-preventable disease because they choose to listen to the nonsense spread by ignorant people." And those ignorant people are the state officials, the Republican state officials who are trying to out-Trump other red states. Let's face it, that's what they're doing. Republican vaccine hesitancy is turning into vaccine hostility. Tennessee is 44th out of the 50 states by percentage of population vaccinated. There are 6 states that have lower vaccination rates than Tennessee. Dr. Fiscus was fired for doing her job because Republicans are all playing on this mission to question the COVID vaccine so that fewer people will get vaccinated so that Biden will fail. That's one of the missions of the Republican Party right now, is this hope that Biden fails. I'm going to break away from my notes for a moment just to give a story from my time, oddly, coincidentally as it is, at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. When I was at the University of Tennessee, you had a Republican student union on campus. You had a Democrat student union on campus. The guy who was the president of the Republican student union made a comment that pissed his fellow Republican student union members off. His comment was, and this was after the election of Bill Clinton, his comment was that Democrats are more patriotic than Republicans. And as you can imagine, that sent some right-wing brains exploding. And here's his logic. According to him, when George H.W. Bush got elected after 8 years of Reagan, we went into the George W. Bush administration. And when George H.W. Bush got elected, he said his Democrat friends, none of whom voted for George H.W. Bush, had the perspective of, well, hopefully he'll do something good for the country. Hopefully, no matter what he does, this, that, the other way, he will end up doing something good for the country. Let's hope for the best. However, when he saw Clinton get elected, his Republican friends and members in this Republican student union on campus all had the mentality of, well, I hope the country goes down the crapper. That'll teach people a lesson. And his reasoning for saying that, from what he's heard from Democrat friends, what he's heard from Republican friends, at least out of his group of friends, family, he considered the Democrats more patriotic because even when their candidate didn't win, they were hoping for the best for the country. Whereas when a Democrat won the presidency, he heard Republican voters wanting America to suffer, wanting the country to go downhill, wanting the economy to collapse, wanting society to start breaking down. They wanted the wheels to fall off of America just because it wasn't their guy that got elected. And I would have to agree with him by that logic. Democrats are more patriotic than the Republicans. To the country, that is. The right-wing media, like Fox News, is portraying the government encouraging folks to get vaccinated as authoritarianism. Because apparently right-wing news media doesn't really know what authoritarianism is. Offering someone a vaccine that will help them is not really authoritarianism. Let's face it. Trump in a Fox News interview said, the vaccine on very young people is something you really gotta stop. You have this group of people who seem to think that because the vast majority of the people who get the worst of COVID are elderly, that kids, you don't really have to worry about them. I just did a video about kids in Mississippi, 2 of them on life support. It will affect kids. It'll affect young kids, older kids. It'll affect people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and on up. I mean, maybe not in the same kind of numbers, but let's face it. If you're a 25-year-old, the last thing you want is to be hanging to life on life support in an ICU somewhere. The last thing you want as a parent, I hope, is for your 2-year-old daughter, son, whoever, to end up in ICU, clinging to life support, to make it through only to find out 5 years later, 10 years later, 20 years later, they have all these lingering health problems because of this time they spent fighting COVID as a child because their parents were too ignorant to get vaccinated. Marjorie Taylor Greene has compared the Biden administration's idea of going door to door offering COVID vaccines to the Nazi brown shirts. Because, let's face it, she's an idiot. Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin has used Fox News and media appearances to highlight the few people who have had bad reactions to the COVID vaccine, without providing the context that the vast majority of people who get the vaccine feel mild and oftentimes no side effects at all. At the most recent CPAC, Alex Berenson, who is a constant perverse personality nowadays on Fox News, he's an author that goes on to Fox News to give misinformation about vaccines. He gave a anti-vax line at the most recent CPAC, which garnered him an applause line.
They were hoping, the government was hoping, that they could sort of sucker 90% of the population into getting vaccinated, and it isn't happening, right? There's a younger people are well aware of what the risks really are, and they're well aware of the side effect profile of the vaccine.
And that's an applause line for the right wing now. That's the 2021 CPAC. That's the Conservative Political Action Conference. It happened in Texas this year. I'm not sure if it was Dallas or Houston. I'm not going to try and claim where it was at. But that was an applause line for this moron author who goes on Fox News constantly to put out vaccine misinformation. And that's that the Biden administration is going to fall short of the vaccine goals. Because of us, because of the idiot right wing. We've been pushing it. People aren't getting vaccinated. People are getting sick again. People are dying again. And we're going to end up getting a Republican back in office. That's not patriotism. Sorry. Trump won in 2020 in 17 of the 18 states with the lowest vaccination rates. The Republicans who are doing this, who are playing this political game, the people they're hurting are their own constituents. There are people who can't get vaccinated. Children under 12 still can't get vaccinated. There are some adults with pre-existing conditions that cause them not to be able to get the vaccine. Community spread in these red states like Tennessee are giving the virus the ability to continue to mutate, eventually putting us all at a greater risk, because as the virus is allowed to continue growing and mutating, it's becoming worse. And that will just continue. Here is a compilation video of some vaccine skeptics who, to set this video up, when Trump was in office and they were working on the vaccines were great. The vaccines were going to be awesome. Trump was getting it through really fast, and it's going to be great. Now that Biden's in office, well, there are some people that have negative side effects. The vaccines aren't 100% effective. They throw out all these ridiculous points. But here's the video.
Result of Operation Warp Speed, not one, not two, but three highly effective vaccines. And so I'm perplexed by the difficulty we have in finishing the job.
President Trump deserves a lot of credit to produce a vaccine while it was being tested and approved. So now once it's approved, it can start shipping immediately. So that was a brilliant operation from my standpoint, and I hope it is as safe and effective as it certainly seems to be.
We are all pro-vaccine. But again, just because the vaccine is generally safe doesn't mean that it's 100% safe.
I want to contribute to building up that herd immunity, and so I'm going to do the responsible thing. I'm probably going to get the vaccine and move on. So I'm not opposed to it. Let's not lose sight of the fact that this is still an experimental vaccine being used under emergency use authorization. The federal government does not have the right to tell Americans that they have to get this vaccine, and it's none of their business who's had it and who hasn't had it.
Operation Warp Speed worked. A 7-year normal process time from the start to the finish on a vaccine. Now we've done it in less than 12 months. It's amazing.
There are a lot of people who don't believe in a vaccine. That's called personal freedom. That's called their right to choose to get a vaccine versus not get a vaccine.
Operation Warp Speed, it worked at warp speed. Not one, but 2 promising vaccine candidates, both over 95% effective. I've been vaccinated. I'm told that I am now safe from getting this. This is ripples well down the chain, because right now you have schools saying, can they make a segment of the population that is barely affected by this get vaccines that we don't even know the long-term effects of?
The one thing that could save us and could really help us, and that's the vaccine. I've been a big proponent of releasing it early. I think that we've had enough safety and effectiveness data.
And as soon as we get the vaccine, we're going to get out of this in a rapid fashion. And all I would say to government officials is let's get the vaccine out as soon as we can.
Some have both had the disease and the vaccine, but we should study that also, because we would want to know, is the vaccine more dangerous, or are you more likely to have serious side effects? And 1 dose may be enough, but also maybe 0 doses is enough.
And that was those Republicans, in their own words, touting the vaccines under Trump and then attacking the vaccines under Biden. I mean, it's political, and it's frankly disgusting that we will do this. I'm not saying Democrats don't play politics, but that's not what we're talking about here. Democrats are not politicizing this. Democrats were not in any way trying to fight the vaccines. We're not trying to demonize the vaccines last year when Trump was in office. They just weren't, because that makes no damn sense. Why do you want your own constituents to get sick? However, the state representatives in Tennessee, the Republicans of grand old Tennessee, are saying they do want people to get sick. They want people to die, because they are absolutely not pro-life, no matter how many times they lie and claim they are. Anyway, thanks for watching my video. Please give me a like, a subscribe, and by all means, have a good day.